Welcome to the LIMB-itless podcast. The LIMB-itless podcast is centered around exactly that, being limitless. Hunting, fishing, fitness, nutrition, adventure, disabilities. What may be covered during the LIMB-itless podcast will be, well, limitless. Stay tuned for this episode of the LIMB-itless podcast. Good morning, LIMB-itless podcast listeners. Regardless of when you listen to this podcast or watch this podcast, we are recording on a fine, sunny, bright morning here. I'm in Southern Maryland. Our guest is up in Wisconsin. I'm really excited about today's episode. This is going to be a first of this type of a guest. Hopefully get a couple of more in this realm. But first things that we're going to talk about, as we always do, always is a big word. If you ever went to any type of relationship counseling, you would know that always is not a good word to use. And I just misused it. So I don't always announce sponsors, but I typically do. So we're going to run through them as I sip on one of them right now. This is a hot cup of pour over Hunting Day coffee. Oh, nice yellow mug right there. Big shout out on the YouTube channel. Hunting Days on both ends of this podcast this morning. I'm drinking a pour over of Keep Hunting. Hunting Day coffee, 10% off any order on their website, LIMB-itless10. We have On Point Adventure Foods. If you are into camping, if you are into backpacking, if you are into backcountry hunting, if you like to have some type of an emergency ration underneath the back seat of your vehicle or in the trunk or in your house, and part of those rations are freeze-dried food, I highly recommend that you check out On Point Adventure Foods out of Pennsylvania. They're good friends of mine. They're people of faith, and they make incredible food. It's 10% off any order at On Point Adventure Foods. That's LIMB-itless10. We have Vortex Optics coming in at 25% off any Vortex item at eurooptics.com. That code is VTXLMTLS25. Wilderness Athlete, 20% off any Wilderness Athlete product at their website. That's LIMB-itless20. And most shows, I have a Nalgene bottle full of one of their products that I'm sipping on. But this morning, I'm not through enjoying my hunting day. So it's just hunting day with me this morning. But I do consume Wilderness Athlete products multiple times a day. I drink their energy drink. I drink their hydration drink every day. I drink and consume their green mix every day. And I use their vitamin pack every single day. And then I also use their pre-workout when I'm going to go throw some barbells around or the sandbags or whatever. I do use their pre-workout as well. And throughout the year, depending upon what I'm doing, I will use some of their other products. But check them out. Again, that's LIMB-itless20 for 20% off Wilderness Athlete. And then a good Navy buddy of mine, he is now retired as well. He has the Love Sauce Hot Sauce Company. It is a small batch boutique hot sauce company out of Maryland. That is 10% off any order of $12 or more. And then we have Venandy Holsters out of Utah. Prior Marine, prior law enforcement officer that started making his own holsters for use in service and personal carry out of protection for himself and his family when he was off duty. And that turned from making holsters in his garage for himself to starting to branch out and make them for other people. Turned into a side business for him while he was still actively serving his community. He partnered with Badlands because he's a huge Badlands fan. He designed a holster that fits with the Badlands bino harness. That's really where he hit the ground running. And he has now morphed that into holsters for pretty much any bino harness on the market. And if you watch one of the previous episodes with Phil Keppel and Four Arrows Outdoors, and or watch the episode that I recorded with Venandy holsters, and you can see their holster design with the bino harness. It places your sidearm right against your chest. It's a very natural, easy draw cycle. It puts your firearm right in the ready condition. They're just a great company, and they make regular inside and out of the belt holsters for daily carry. They're incredible. They have partnered with us. 10% discount at Venandy Holsters. That's B-Limitless 10. So check them out. I highly recommend them. And last but not least, guys, I want to share, and I always back up sponsors with this. I do not get paid to record and produce the Limitless podcast. In fact, I pay to do it. I pay out of my own pocket to produce content for you as the listener. All of those sponsor codes, they are for you. I have pursued companies that I use and that I trust and that I respect and have faith in. I have pursued them to partner with me for this show. I've asked nothing from them other than a code for you. So please use those codes. So with that said, some of you may not know this, but I was a firefighter. I left active duty Navy service in the mid 90s for a couple of reasons. But one of those reasons was because I had a desire to become a firefighter. So I left active duty Navy, I returned to my hometown of Washougal, Washington, and I entered the fire service as a volunteer fireman at the city of Washougal, Washington in Southwest Washington. From there, I shifted to Walla Walla, enrolled at Walla Walla Community College in their fire science program. I was an intern at the College Place Fire Department in College Place, Washington, which is a neighboring town. So I lived in the fire department while pursuing my fire science degree. I was activated and sent to Bosnia. And when I returned, I moved back into the western side of Washington, enrolled in Portland Community College, and finished up my fire science degree with Portland Community College. So I do have an Associates of Applied Science as in fire science. And I was hired by the city of Walla Walla to be a firefighter EMT there. I served there for several years until I was recalled and deployed to Bosnia with the Navy, not Bosnia, Bahrain. And while I was in Bahrain as a diver slash EOD assistant, I dropped a package to go to EOD school. It was approved. I made it through EOD school, and I never returned to the fire service. Firefighters are near and dear to my heart. It's the second best job in the world. And God created EOD techs so firefighters could have heroes too. So with all that said, with that lengthy intro for this man that is now laughing, I had the pleasure of recording with Bob Barteck, who is a retired firefighter. So Bob, welcome to the show, and please take it away.
Good morning, Aaron. I that's the first time. Usually that line, you play that between cops, firefighters exist so cops could have heroes and whatnot. That's the first time that I've seen that with the EOD tech, but I'll take it. I'll take number two to an EOD tech, because I wouldn't want to be near those devices that you were on. So, but yeah, thanks for the warm intro. My name is Bob Barteck. As Aaron said, I live in Wisconsin. I'm in central Wisconsin, in Wisconsin Rapids, and I retired from the fire service the very end of 2023, December of 2023, after a 33-year career in the fire service. It's depends on how deep we want to go on it. I'll give the highlights of kind of the resume here, and we can go kind of into some of the origin story, maybe a little later. But I started as a volunteer in Owen Withy, Wisconsin, where my dad, at 80 years old, is still on that fire department as a volunteer. He joined at 76. And I had gone to tech school, got a degree, interned in Oshkosh Fire Department for a year, and then was hired in Wisconsin Rapids, where I spent the majority of my career. 25 years. In 2019, I was recruited to go up the Wisconsin River to Wausau, and was asked to be the deputy chief up there. I was the deputy chief in Wisconsin Rapids here at the time of my departure, and went up to Wausau. And then the chief that brought me in there, she was retiring, and so the whole purpose for me coming up was in the deputy chief role was to succeed her as fire chief, and I did that. And so I concluded my career as the fire chief up in the city of Wausau. And I'll tell you, it was that 33 years went by in a blink of an eye. And I have so many cherished memories of the people that I work with. I was truly privileged for the entirety of my career to work with the best people each and every one of our communities has. There was a lot of doors that opened up to me, for service outside of the local municipality. I was an instructor for the Office of Justice Assistance for the state of Wisconsin when it was out of there. Now it's underneath the Emergency Management Group. I was a technical rescue instructor, and I became a structural collapse technician. That bridged into an opportunity to join a federal disaster medical team, which I served on for 8 years. Wisconsin won DMAT, and did several deployments to natural disasters and national security events. And so it was a lot of fun. I had a little bit of interaction with the military over that period of time. When we were going to disasters, a lot of times we would hitch rides with National Guard units and whatnot. And annually we would train with those units, especially a lot of the aviation units and air medical evac stuff. And so I got a little taste of the military. I think I would have fit in there too, like a square block and a square hole too. But the fire service definitely suited me. So I retired from that in 23. My off-duty hustle when I was a line firefighter, because you don't make a lot of money. Aaron will attest to that, I'm sure, when you were working in Washington. My off-duty hustle was I worked for a contractor. We built houses and did remodeling jobs. And so as I neared retirement, I got my Wisconsin contractor's license, and I opened up a little construction company, Tumble Rock Construction and Consulting. There's the boss, which is my wife, and then there's me, that's the employee. And so last year I privileged to build our new dream home. Built it myself, and it was a real healing year. It's difficult to walk away from, as Aaron will attest to, I'm sure, to really a lot of difficulties to walk away from a 33-year career in the service of fire and EMS. And I've had a lot of healing that occurred over the last year as I put this house together that I'm sitting in this morning. And now I've taken a part-time job working for a company called Wendell Companies that are out of Buffalo, New York. They've got a subsidiary here in Wisconsin called Five Bugles Design, and they design and build fire stations and public safety stations. And so now, so now I'm doing some project management for them. Going to be yesterday I was up. We were interviewing for a construction management job on a fire station that we designed up in Minnesota, and I don't want to give away the city, but we were west of Duluth, and so it was just great to step back into the firehouse, and I really excited about the opportunities that Wendell's bringing me through Five Bugles Design and all that construction management stuff. So it's going to be a real next fun chapter here. So yeah,
that's excellent. We're gonna jump into one of the topics that you covered here in your intro. But there's two other reasons why I was really looking forward to hosting you on the show. Because we share three things in common. Well, actually, now that we're talking about it, we share four things in common. So the fire service is one.
Yep.
Archery, the love of archery and hunting, is another.
Absolutely.
Our faith is another.
Yep.
And then Chris Ham,
the connector.
Yeah. I mean, those are four great things, right? I mean, we could talk for hours on those four things.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I met you, was Vortex 2 years ago. Was there. And
great event.
You look back at that event and how many connections were made there. And so, yeah, as Aaron said, I'm a passionate bow hunter. I've been that way my whole life. And Chris Ham, who's the co-owner of HHA Sports, founded what brought Aaron and I together, and so many people together. That's why we call Chris the Connector. Is his nonprofit HHA USA works to support veterans, first responders, law enforcement officers through archery shoots and raising money for all kinds of different um, veteran and law enforcement, first responder support groups.
Yeah.
And so he lives in my community. Actually, where I built my house, I think we're less than a mile, or about a mile apart from where we both are. We're close enough that we share buck pictures on our trail cameras from our properties. Like
That's awesome.
this buck could be, I don't have the opportunity where I hunt. I've got a 1 acre inside of a subdivision on a lake. And my wife has told me no shooting deer off the deck. And so then I'll send pictures of bucks to Chris. Like, did you see this one? You'd be a shooter, because then Buck, he's got 20 acres down there. He can hunt them down on his place. But both my kids work for Chris actually too. I've got 2 children. My son Andrew is 25. He's a power lineman for a local electrical company. He's got 2 kids of his own, 2 boys, and my daughter's a senior at lacrosse. And both of them in high school worked for Chris assembling parts. And so when you buy HHA site and they say made in America, absolutely is made in America by, they're just such a wonderful family. My kids loved working out there, and they're great first jobs for, local kids out there. They sit down at a bench and they assemble archery sites. And
That's awesome.
yeah. So yeah, we've got a lot in common. That and elk hunting in the mountains.
Yes.
Yeah. I've done a lot of that. So yeah, and it's tag season. You and I, before we came on, we're talking about all the states that we're sending for tags for, and I'm pretty excited about that. All over, I think I'm 8 or 9 states. There was a lot of years that I was working and had kids where I couldn't go out west hunting, and I wasn't sending for any tags, and I was just sending for points. Well, now I'm sitting on a bunch of points for some stuff, and so now that I'm in semi-retired, going to hopefully start pulling some tags.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Well, that's a lot for us to unpack. We do have a little bit of a timeline because we both have other things going on this morning.
Yep.
But the first thing that I want to talk about is volunteer service. So we both started out in the volunteer firefighter ranks. And I, during my break in service, I spent time in the Navy Reserves. So I've had the opportunity to basically, I don't want to say work for free, but be on the volunteer and reserve ranks, both the city firefighter level and then also in the Navy. And you started out as a volunteer. How was that experience for you? And looking back and looking through your career, how do you feel about volunteers?
Well, I'll tell you that it was a very formative part of my childhood, the local volunteer fire department that I grew up in. And so I lived in Owen, and we lived in Owen, and my dad joined that fire department in 1976. I was 7 years old. And at that time, 911 didn't even exist, which is hard to fathom. No cell phones, none of that. And so it was such a really interesting childhood. The fire hall was kitty corner out our back door, like a block away. And so my visions of my father as a volunteer firefighter was that the fire phone would ring. So our normal on the wall dial, rotary dial phone would ring in a different pattern. It would just go into a constant ring, have a short pause, constant ring, short pause. That was the fire phone. And so when someone dialed 229-2112 in the Owen and Withy area, that would ring at the 30 firefighters' houses, that ring. And then one of them would pick up, or all of them are picking up and they're listening. And then one would call up and say, this is the fire department. What's your emergency? And a lot of times it was, just sharing a name. This is, Henry so-and-so, Martha's having a problem. Okay, we'll be right over. No exchange of address or anything because everybody knew them.
That's funny.
It was. And then you want to talk about a 7 and 8-year-old being totally inducted? Like, I've no wonder why I became a firefighter, because when dad would leave, a lot of times he would say, Bobby, blow the fire whistle. Underneath the phone was a little button, and there was my dad had a little card written out for my brother and I. And if it was our job to blow the fire whistle, you'd push onto that button. You still had to have the phone off the receiver, because it was connected then to the fire fault. And then the fire whistles would blow on the water towers in Owen and Withy, alerting the firefighters that might be at their jobs that there was a fire or an ambulance call. And so you would blow that for a certain number of times. There's no greater power than a 7-year-old with a button on a fire whistle in a small
Oh
town.
my,
You
that's
know,
really cool.
it is. And we just grew up at that firehouse. Me and all of my friends' dads were volunteer firefighters in a little community like that. That's where the neighbors serve neighbors. And I think that there's been some drift away from that, but then I also see a lot of communities where it's drifting back that way. And so, it was very interesting, to lifestyle to grow up. I didn't realize how different it was until I got around other kids that never had exposure to that. Because all my friends, if they were down washing trucks at the fire station, we would show up and climb on the trucks and help wash or whatever it was. And the parades, we'd be on the trucks, and it was just a wonderful, community thing, and it still is. And actually, that seed is still remains in me. I didn't share when I was talking. My wife and I actually just last week. So where we built this home, we're in the town of Saratoga. They've got a little emergency medical first responder group here. I still carry my critical care paramedic license. My wife is an EMT basic. We joined the little township, little township department here, just because I struggled to live in this community without serving it in some manner. And I think that that's what, when you get around firefighters, and you've seen it, that passion for service, it's honestly, a lot of guys struggle with it in retirement,
Mhm.
because there's that loss of identity. There's that loss of, well, who do I serve now?
Mhm.
And it gets difficult for a lot of dudes. It's a hard career, and I didn't come out with it, out of it without my bumps and bruises too. But I'm very optimistic about it. I think my faith has a big part of why I've been so successful in kind of a recovery from the career. But yeah, so volunteers, boy, I love them. I don't know how our
So
country would do it. Where you're at in Maryland and the New England, boy, volunteer fire companies they do the job of what would full-time fire departments be doing in a lot of parts of the country.
it's a big deal. It's a real big deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
I live less than a mile from the what they call the fire company.
Hmm.
Here in our little township. There's nothing here anymore. In fact, the most active building in our little township is the fire company.
Wow.
Um, Interesting facts. So, 1968 was the first 911 call in America down in
Wow.
Georgia.
Okay.
Um, as of 2020, as of 2020, the United States had not hit 100% 911 coverage in all of the United States.
Isn't that something?
It's 98%. Um, on the other side of that, as far as awareness, do you remember the TV show Emergency?
Oh, Johnny and Roy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that was kicked off in 1972 and it ran through 1979.
Hmm.
So just kind of the correlation between, and our emergency medical field medicine response, all of that stems from the military and the war. A
Yes,
lot
it
of
does.
it came from Korean War. Um, yeah, I mean, World War, we had medics in all the world wars, but the Korean War, I mean, some great advances coming out of the Korean War. Um, but you look at, 1968, 911, first call made. People are starting to become aware of the emergency services response capabilities to then kick off a TV show, Emergency, which was all about a fire and medical team out in California. I believe it was out in California.
Yep, it was all LA based. Yes.
Yep. And then just watching that grow and improve and change from, I mean, this is another rabbit hole we can fall down, but I don't want to go there right yet. But you go from the fire service to providing emergency medicine because the fire service was developed by Ben Franklin. I mean, he's
Mhm.
he's like founder of fire service and fire insurance, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
Um, but then we have emergency medicine, and then all of the fingers that the fire department transferred into wildland firefighting and technical rescue and
Hazmat.
hazmat, getting into child car seat safety. I mean, there's so many things that the fire department has transitioned into while serving their communities and their counties and their states. It's incredible. True professionals and giving servitude to humanity. It's incredible. It really is.
It is, and you really touched on something I'm passionate about. The title firefighter is so much more than just the actual act of firefighting. Both departments that I worked in and that I led in, 90% of the call volume was EMS.
Yeah.
We are the very small percentage of it is fire, and even a smaller percentage of those fire calls are active, real structure fires. City of Wausau, the last year that I was there, we did 7,000 calls that year, and I think we had a total of it was under 100 actual structure fires. And so you think about that 7,000 versus 100.
Yeah.
And so but the EMS calls are really truly where we make the biggest difference in impact in a life. I would also argue that some of the technical rescue stuff, especially where, up in Wausau, we had everybody was attracted to the water there. We had a very active water rescue program. We had an airboat, just like you find down in southern Florida. We had that because you could run it over the water and ice combined and things like that. Our hazmat team was very busy. We were a regional team for the state of Wisconsin. So we would respond actually out of our jurisdiction to go help smaller jurisdictions that didn't have the capabilities that we did. It every day when that call went off, you never knew what you were going to encounter. And you can never say you've seen it all, which one of the things I just loved about the fire.
No.
I just loved about it. But as I would tell people that are interested in getting into it, I said, you really have to have a love for EMS, and you have to have empathy that just spills out of you. You can't really, it's got to almost be born into you. You have to be raised in an environment like that. People have to be called to it. Right now the fire and EMS is struggling to recruit quality people. And there, we've got a number of young, people that will come along and try it out. They want to try it. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of them that tried it out and it wasn't a good fit for them. And that's fine. Move on to another thing. But, years ago when there was more competition for the jobs, those type of candidates would have been weeded out. And so it's when I encourage people to look at the fire service, if you've got a passion, to help someone. Actually, during one of my interviews, I was interviewing a really great firefighter paramedic, and he's still a great firefighter paramedic. And one of the things that he said during his interview, and this is like I don't even think he was 21 yet, 19 or 20. And I said, what's drawing you to the fire service? What's your why? Why do you want to join our trade? And he says, I can't walk past someone that needs help without helping them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is. And that's at its core. And at its core, he's also a man of faith. He's called to that. That call for service to love one another comes from Jesus. And it's so neat because you just see that high rate of strong Christian men working in the fire and EMS trade. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on that because the term firefighter is so universally now utilized in the U.S. from wildland to structural to all these other sub trades. I dare you to find a newscast that doesn't include some type of report that includes what a firefighter is doing in the community that day, national or local.
Yeah.
It's always we're along with our law enforcement partners. I have such an enormous amount of respect for the law enforcement officers I worked with over the years. Some phenomenal individuals there also, and a job that I would struggle with. That's not my niche. I'm glad that there's men and women that are called to that and do it well because that's a super hard job too.
It is. We have out of levity, we brought up heroes and you brought up law enforcement at the beginning of the show, and it's law enforcement is and I pursued law enforcement when I was younger, and they do have an incredibly hard job. I'm becoming involved in the county and the law enforcement academy here out on the Eastern Shore, and I've had the opportunity to speak, and there's more coming. And one of the things I said day before yesterday when I was up interacting with their crisis intervention team, that as a guy from military special operations, when I perceive a threat, I I could go through my rules of engagement and dispatch that threat in any means necessary within my left and right limits, right? And I had an idea of what those threats were. For a law enforcement officer, they do not. They don't have the same clear and defined rules of engagement or left and right limits that a combatant has. And I truly feel for them. And not only that, the scrutiny that they receive if or when they make a mistake. I just feel so bad for them, and I know law enforcement officers um, on an individual basis. I have some friends that are either prior or retired. I know some actively serving law enforcement officers, and people wonder why they become hardened and jaded, and their personalities get so hard and stern because it's because of what they have to deal with and how they have to view the world every single day in their home. I have PTSD from being a firefighter and from being in combat, but my combat PSD isn't because of necessarily what I've experienced here on home turf, right? I brought that home with me. Law enforcement officers are dealing with that PSD because they live in it in the place where they're supposed to be in safety and comfort, right? So I mean, they're dealing with a whole different realm than a service member is, a military service member is. I have a huge amount of respect for them. But to lighten the mood again a little bit, the reason why I have so much fun talking about EOD and firefighters is, one, the similarity between EOD and firefighting. I think that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to it. One of the reasons, and why I functioned in it so well. When you look at how a firefighter operates and how an EOD tech operates, they're very similar. And for a firefighter, you go from 0 to 100 in an instant, right? You're doing station work, or you're training, or you're having a meal. You're doing your daily life. When the tones go off, you go from just whatever you're doing to boom, you're level 10 and you're moving out, until you get on scene and you're able to get eyes on and assess and determine where that level needs to be. Um, being a combatant and being an EOD combatant is very similar. I mean, if you're on patrol or if you're out on a mission, that's different. But you might be on call for the day, and boom, you get an EOD call, and you go from working on the rig or your equipment or at the range, or doing reports, or whatever you're doing at that period of time, day or night. The radio goes off for a call, for a response. You are putting your gear on, getting in your truck, meeting security, and rolling out, whether it's in the States or in combat. It's very, very similar. And sometimes you get a call and it's like fire department. You get there, it's a false alarm. We get down the road and there's nothing there, or we get to a on target and there's nothing there. But other times you get there and really, really bad things are happening. It's very similar. And then look at your gear. For a portion of my career, one of the primary items that I put on was the big green suit.
Oh yeah.
It's very similar to a firefighter putting on their turnouts in an SCBA. When you put in all that equipment, all that gear on, you lose mobility. You're restrained. It's very hot. You have a full face mask on. Your world becomes, you get blinders on. You're in tunnel vision. um it's very, very comparable. And so that and whenever we get called, whether it's firefighters or EOD techs, it's because people want us and need us there. When law enforcement gets called, they are not always wanted.
Yeah.
Somebody called them for a reason, but that doesn't mean that once they get there, they're really, really wanted there. And I feel bad for them as well. You know, every time you have an like a community in service day or neighborhood day, right? When I was at Walla Walla, we would purposefully show up late. We'd always show up 5, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes after the start. 15 minutes would be pushing it, but typically 5 or 10. We wanted the cops to get there first because it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
so much fun to roll up into a cul-de-sac or on a neighborhood street with the cop cars already there, and there's doors are open and kids are crawling through the back seat and they're standing in front of the officers. And as soon as the big red truck rolls in, you know, it's like the Pied Piper. You know, they just funnel over to the trucks. You know,
Yeah.
it's cops just they get a bad rap, and that's why I like to say that God created EOD techs so that firefighters can have heroes too, because it's you know it's just different. You know, there's no
Yeah.
riff. There's no rift between us. There's a rift
Yeah.
between cops and firefighters. You know, it's like the Navy and the Marines, right? You know, cops and firefighters is similar riff.
Oh yeah. You know, I was where I spent the end of my career there up in Wausau. That was a public safety station, and so the police department was connected to the fire department. And I became so close with the command staff and a lot of the officers up there, and I got even a better viewpoint than I had. You know, I always worked on almost every call that we were on the street. Um, Law enforcement officers would respond alongside of us, and I've got a lot of fun stories
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot from that. But there's also a lot of tragic stories, and the things that I have my PTSD from. There's a law enforcement officer involved in every one of those incidents, and so I know they carry that same burden, right? And they're just wonderful people. But the police chief and deputy police chief and the command staff at Wausau, boy, we just hit it right off. And if you go onto YouTube and watch some of the videos that they're coming out with, they're one of the most approachable departments out there. They've got a full-time videographer that's working for the city now that really highlights them and tries to elevate their acceptance in the community of Wausau, and it's working so well up there. And you'll see some of the videos where me and the police chief are going back and forth, kind of digging on each other a little bit and just having fun. And I think it's so important to just see for a community that all of our response agencies are in harmony, are one in
Mm-hmm.
unison, because we each have our unique jobs and we understand what each other needs, and we can help in those environments a lot. I couldn't imagine doing a lot of the things that I did over my career without a law enforcement officer or a whole team of them helping with us. A lot of the big incidents, we'd have a joint command set up. I'd have whoever the law enforcement command officer is, join at the hip. We're making decisions together. But yeah, one of the things that you touched on there when you were talking about the similarities with the EOD techs that you were so right on, and that's that 0 to 100 in 3 minutes. I mean, I would describe that to people that these guys could be doing whatever they're in the station, training, eating, whatever it is. In 3 minutes from this moment, they can be running through the front door of something that's on fire. They can be
Yes.
running into a shooting. They can be running into a child that is having a life-threatening emergency. They don't
Yeah.
know what it is, right? They don't know. You can't predict it. And it's one of the things that makes the job so exciting, but it's also one of the things that takes so much from
Yeah.
the people. They're
Yep.
so the health and wellness of firefighters and paramedics, law enforcement officers is so key for the success of communities. Their health and safety is directly tied to the health and safety of the community. And communities that get it, like in Wausau, they got it. We had mandatory, or I should say required, mental health check-ins for all of our firefighter, paramedics, and our law enforcement officers in that community. They had to sit down with a mental health counselor and go through an assessment. It didn't mean that they needed counseling, but it's a check-in to see how they're doing, and then that counselor could make recommendations. Hey, I think you could benefit from coming back and talking about some of this stuff, trying to diffuse these problems before they become, as you and I both know, huge problems that you're trying to overcome later in your life.
Yeah.
I spent last year not only working on this house, but in therapy with a Christian counselor, talking about stuff that I never dealt with 20, 25 years ago. And so if we can help these young 19, 20-year-old kids that are joining the trade, help them digest and be healthy and happy and resilient, and just have outstanding off-duty lives that aren't affected by their on-duty life. I think we owe it to them. The other neat thing that we were doing in that community is we had an athletic trainer in 2 days a week.
Oh, good for you guys.
Yeah, and it was both on the fire department side and the police department side. She would come in, outstanding personality, former military. She's a Marine turned athletic trainer. She's just got this wonderful personality. But our people were always working banged up. They're tactical athletes. There's never a time that they're not putting gear on. You know, if it's a shooting call, a drug call, anything like that, they've got to put on their tactical gear. You know, firefighters, this is one change too, and I'm going to go on a tangent. I'll do this a lot, Aaron. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's why we're here.
Yeah. The need now. All right, I brought in this young 19, 20-year-old firefighter. We're getting them measured for a custom set of turnout gear. And here's your bulletproof vest also, and your tactical helmet, because you're going to need it. And that's changed. That wasn't what I grew up seeing in the little volunteer fire department. And so that's been a big, difficult change. And honestly, for older guys like me, we had to be able to open our eyes to see that, to make that change, to keep our people safe. And there was chiefs that did very well at it, and there's others that kind of failed their departments in that area, saying, well, we're going to leave that for the cops. Well, when their bullets are flying, they're not choosing their target. And if we're going to go downstream or go downrange, you know, and try to make life-changing or life-saving interventions in split seconds, sometimes that means putting people into, you know, we try to do our best to keep people safe, but it's also putting them into dangerous situations when the risk is worth the reward. You know, we don't risk. There's a really common saying: we risk nothing to save nothing, and we'll risk everything to save something.
It's a high risk. It's a high risk profession, Bob. Everything about
it. Yeah, it really is. It really is. And well, I'm gonna finish talking about the athletic trainer, and I'm gonna come back to that, because we'll want to talk on that. But that athletic trainer, all of our people are working banged up on a daily basis, and she'll do massage therapy, physical therapy, cupping, dry needling, all kinds of things like that to help out with these small injuries. And it was amazing as a leader to justify the cost of that program. I could look at what I was saving on workers' comp claims versus the cost of her program, and it was saving us over $100,000 a year within the first couple of years of development of it. And she led all kinds of neat initiatives that led to healthier firefighters. And she's passionate about their mental fitness, because when do they unload? They're on her table. I'm hurting physically, but you know what? Now she's hearing things where they're hurting mentally also. And she's been a great help that way. But to go back to that, kind of the dangers of it, and some of those similarities between the EOD techs and firefighters, was that command and control decision making that's required. I had an unfortunate incident, I'm not going to go into it, where me and my partner made 7 Mayday calls from the interior of a collapsing restaurant. And we were able to self-rescue out of there. And when I emerged from that building, as it was literally collapsing behind us as we're climbing out, my turnout gear's roached, my helmet's melted, barely out alive, my partner and I looked at the chaos that was going on that fire ground, and I was just dumbfounded by it. And it was because we had a fire service leader on the fire ground that day, that his version of training on a beautiful, say, spring afternoon, he would say, let's do turnout gear training that day. And when the first time he said that to me, I'm like, what are we going to do for turnout gear training? He says, grab your bunker pants, set them next to your cot, and then if we get a call, put them on. He would just absolute laziness. Every day is a great day to train. And what I learned that day is I was never going to be a fire officer like that. And I became a student of the trade. And so many of the people in our department became students of the trade, not just attending National Fire Academy classes, but any way you could get a bit of information that could make you better at making good command and control decision making. And not just at the fire officer level, but the firefighters have to understand how you're making decisions in your tactics, so they can, when they're downrange, make those same tactical, smart, safe decisions. I frequently would, so as I arrived, say at a structure fire with maybe some life safety involved, fire in mind was a second floor apartment that's getting to be fully involved. The staircase is fully involved. And then downstairs neighbors reporting that there's a pregnant girl that lives on the second floor. Her car's there. I can't find her. And so we've got a potential victim on the second floor. Of course, a small crew that arrives. It's a hot July day, like over 100 degrees. We're in full turnouts. And now I've got to commit someone to that second floor. And I've got firefighters who have trained exactly for that moment. They know exactly what to do. They're going to do a vent enter search. They're going to put a ladder to the second floor. They're going to break a window. They're not going to have a hose line. They're going to climb in through that window. They're going to do a quick search, and they're going to come back out. First priority, you climb in whatever room you've landed in, you close the door to protect you from whatever fire there is, and then you're going to search, and then you're going to move around like that. And the analogy, I bring up that analogy is because the men and women that I was privileged to lead over that time, they knew exactly what to do in those moments. But it was my decision to release them to do that. It's like having a pack of highly trained dogs that know exactly what to do, and all you're going to do is unclip the leash because they're ready to go. And so I had this, my normal huddle, I would get those firefighters next to me, grab their turnout gear by the shoulders, because that meant I'm not releasing you. You're listening to me. Give them the report, give them the task, let the hands go, and boom, they're gone. And they do it, and they exercised it perfectly. In that particular instance, the girl had gotten a ride to a doctor's appointment, wasn't there, but it didn't stop the firefighters from entering. That information came to us later. They were entering just on the chance that she was there, putting their lives at great risk to possibly save that person.
And the only way you can achieve that level of functionality is to train as realistically as you can. That you can only go so far by whiteboarding concepts. Yeah. You can only go so far by, like, when we do free fall operations in the military. We do not get to what we call slick or Hollywood, or even some of our typical training. If you're in PT clothes, like shorts and a t-shirt, right? Having fun, being comfortable, catching rays. There's only so much you can do in a relaxed condition. You think about a lot of concepts, right? And again, you write things down, draw them out, whiteboard them, bounce ideas back and forth, whatever. Or you say, oh yeah, well, we've hit this stage of the drill. I would do this, and this now. And we call it index. Once you hit that point, index, all right, we're done. Well, what happens when you actually have to do those things? You have no concept of any like real concept if your equipment is going to do what you verbalize or think it's going to do. You have no concept of time on how long it's actually going to take you, because all you've ever done is you've said, oh, I'm going to go do that now. And inside your head, you might think, oh yeah, I can knock that out super easy, but you've never actually done it. And you find out, holy cow, that took me 30 minutes to do that. Right. Your body isn't used to it. You have no muscle memory for those activities. Your officers have no idea how to manage their personnel. In those instances, there's just so many things that if you are not taking that training as realistic that it can be from cradle to grave, from beginning to end, you do not know where that end is, and you really don't know how you're going to get there. And that places your personnel in jeopardy. It increases that high risk training or that high risk operation, like real-time operation, exponentially.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this is another thing, probably the similarities from what you did in the Navy and firefighting, is it's difficult to get that level of realism, because you can't safely replicate these dangerous situations. So you do the best you can. Mm-hmm. Burn towers, burn scenarios, buildings, that we're going to be raised, that we get a chance to burn. I would talk a little bit about our tactical EMS program. All right, getting out with the law enforcement officers, training with them. You're in the summer, you're in a school, you're clearing schools, you've got simulated victims there. it's really required, and it builds that. Have you ever heard of EMDR? That's electromotive decisive decision making. We studied it in the fire service for a while, and basically it was some scientists looked at how like these high end military decision makers, leaders, pilots, others that have split seconds to make decisions. How do they make these correct decisions? And it's this whole slide deck mentality that your mind becomes a slide deck of training and real life incidents that you've been involved in over that period of time. Now there's a similar situation in front of me, proper slide for the outcome, a positive outcome comes up, and then you follow that course of action. And it happens in such a split second that you can't even acknowledge it, it's occurring. And so it's the training, frequently training, a variety of training to give our young people as they're coming up the most amount of experiences, positive experiences that they can rely on in those situations. And to speak about firefighting, well, on paramedicine the same way too. It's a familiarity with the equipment that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to look at anything. I see it now, and I'm really excited to see this. Wisconsin has just started one of the local technical college, or I'm not sure where it's exactly originating, is starting the Wisconsin Smoke Diver School. And what that really is coming from is, I think Georgia was the first one to do it. Some of these training instructors that have figured out, if I can train firefighters so well in the basics and so well in the understanding of the gear, that then they become really elite at the advanced tactics, because that's where you always retreat, was your basics. And they put these guys through simulation after simulation after simulation in full turnout gear. You have to be in physical fitness. You can't show up 50 pounds overweight and think that you're going to pass this class, because you're not. And they're really building great firefighters. I see a firefighter from Stevens Point just passed the Indiana Smoke Diver School. So he went all the way down there and sought out that training. That's the other thing that's really cool today that didn't exist when I came into the fire service in the early 90s. We didn't have the internet. You relied on the IFSTA manuals. You probably studied a pile out of those to get your quals in Oregon or Washington. And now I want to know something. There's so many platforms. It's almost like there's too much information out there. And so sometimes you got to drill down. What are we exactly going to try to learn today? And where can I find the best information? Vet it. There's a lot of, this is probably happening in your world too, but there's a lot of marginal firefighters, marginal fire officers that are all becoming influencers. And that I just always encourage firefighters, when they're consuming that content, do that with a raised eyebrow, be skeptical, before you rush into, some of this stuff, because some of these people are just jaded against not getting a promotion or wherever it might be, a gripe that they have. And now they found a platform and some catchphrases and, or some goofy, funny videos. And then they bridge that into something. And what are you learning? Find some really solid, people that are doing it right that you want to emulate. That's what I usually tell my young folks, especially if it's in the department. Pick one or two people above you that are doing the way that you want to do it, and then watch them, talk to them, ask them how they're doing it. Man, I had those people in my life, and they were amazing. They're still mentors to me, still in contact with me.
So let's take the last 20 minutes that we've focused on, like high risk training and high risk response, high risk evolutions, and how to create a very effective tool for that, a professional. Let's transition that to what we share in common in backcountry hunting, because there are, Bob, in my opinion, there's big similarities, right?
Yeah.
And what you closed this previous engagement on was influencers, right? The availability of information, the availability of seeing something of interest and a whole bunch of people advertising it and talking about it, good, bad, or indifferent upon what the information that they're sharing, and stimulating individuals that have no experience in that want to go do that. I speak on it often. I've been backcountry hunting for almost 30 years. 2026 will be my 30-year anniversary in backcountry hunting, and most of it has been solo. Um, and with the advent of YouTube and the hunting celebrities that are out there, Western style hunting has exploded
Especially the
because
archery side.
the
Yes.
yep, archery elk, right? It has just exploded because people that have never done it or were never exposed to it, now they see it and they're enamored by it. Some of those people have never spent a single night in the woods. Now, when I say spent a single night in the woods, I'm not talking about, in a large camp with a dozen people with a cabin or great big tents or RVs. I'm talking about walking away from your vehicle and either sleeping directly on the ground or putting up a small rain fly or a shelter and spending a night in the wilderness. It's a completely different experience. I've I've hunted with grown men in rural environments where the the landmass that we are hunting is surrounded by roads. They would not leave the vehicle in the dark, or would they stay out? They would not return in the dark. They would want to be back to the car or within sight of the car before the lights went out, even though they could walk in any direction and hit a road. They were afraid of getting lost. They were afraid of being in the timber in the dark because they weren't used to it. It's a whole new experience. And it breaks my heart when I'm engaging with people and they're talking about their dream of going out west on an elk hunt, yet they've never even been backpacking. They've never spent a night in the woods, much less going out and backpacking in and trying to hunt a very challenging critter to pursue, right? And it's like, start out small and build yourself up to that big investment. And you were talking about discussing the current tag draw and opportunities right now that you're going through. I'm pretty much waving off this year, but when you look at somebody on the East Coast that spends a couple of years trying to obtain an elk tag, and then they invest their vacation time, because most people that are attracted to this are still in that working class, that working age period of their life. So they're gonna spend the money to do it. They're gonna take the time to do it. They potentially take time away from their family, and they've never been backpacking. So they buy all this new gear, and then they take all this time and they spend all the money to go do it. Some of them don't even make it to day 3. I've heard horror stories of people that they'll go out to a party of 2 or 3, and somebody quits day 2 or 3 because they find out that they're in way over their head, or they might make it to the last day, but all they've done is walk around in the woods and they're miserable because they didn't carry their pack, train with their pack. They might be miserable with their food because they never really tried their meal plan. So they had no idea what it was going to be like to eat their meal plan. And most people don't focus on nutrition. So their energy levels are in the toilet. Their mental capacity is in the toilet. They're cold, they're uncomfortable, they're hot, they're wet. Maybe they're constipated or they have diarrhea again because of that nutrition, right? There's so many negative things about it. Where if they would have spent time preparing for it and training for it, I've told people, they're like, well, we didn't have mountains, or it's so far to drive to go on some type of a backpacking trip. And I said, okay, so check it out. I was like, you have all your gear. Pick a Friday afternoon when you're both home from work, or whoever you're going to hunt with, husband and wife or friends or whoever it is. Put on all your gear, map out a route, go hike 5-6 miles with all of your stuff on, and then go pitch your camp in your backyard, and then get up in the morning and then go do it again before you kick your Saturday off. I'm like, you're going to get an idea of what it's like to walk miles with your stuff on and then go pitch your tent and sleep in your stuff. I'm like, if you never do that, it's a really, really bad move to do that for the first time, real time. You know exactly how that goes.
Yeah. I like how you're paralleling it to backpacking, because that's what it is. And I was privileged to grow up as a Boy Scout as a kid doing backpacking trips. And I think that's where a lot of those skills are built. And, you know, Aaron, I had read your book and I really liked the opening chapters when you're talking about your pathway to learning. You were talking about that first pack, like what you were wearing a military pack and it's digging into your shoulders and it's rubbing you raw. And that was right because you didn't practice with that. Now the gear is so elite.
Yeah.
If you come to my house here, my wife and I are like running an outdoor. We're like running like an outdoor store museum here. I've got I buy packs. I never get rid of any. So I've got my old heavy. Well, I lost my Alaskan frame pack in a canoe accident where I tipped a canoe. That's a whole nother story. But I've got my old Kelty pack. Now my wife and I both have these really nice Osprey packs, right? And luckily I'm fortunate. My wife likes to backpack, and we've done a lot of that. You know, we've gone into the Havasupai Indian Nation, you know, next to the Grand Canyon, backpacked down into there and back out. We backpacked through the Yosemite Wilderness a number of years ago as a couple. Raising my son, he became an Eagle Scout. We were took him and the troop out to Philmont, New Mexico. If you've never heard that, San Diego Cristo Mountains. We led those 10 boys, over 105 miles over 10 days, backpacking the whole way. Now that somewhat supported every 3 days we would pick up food at these backcountry camps. And so but it's still these boys, my son was like 15 at the time and doing that. And then he fell in love with that. He went back to Philmont several times. He actually worked there 2 summers out of high school, and he met his now wife out there. And those kids that work at that Philmont Boy Scout ranch, when they get a day off, so Andrew was working down in the base camp, they go run up in the mountains like it's nothing. They throw on a pack, let's go up, because they figure it out. They figure out what you need, what you don't need, and things like that. There's big parallels. And it's really, you know, I've been hunting and I'm not going to share the spot in Montana. That's very near and dear to me. It was introduced to me in 1998 by some really close friends. And, you know, when we were there in 98 and through the early 2000s, you know, we would maybe run into 1 or 2 other bow hunters in town. When you're up in the mountains, never. And the last time I was there, it was just insane, the volume of archery elk hunters that were there from all over the country. And I can see a little bit, you know, why some of the locals are rubbed a little wrong, you know, over that. And because I was feeling rubbed, I'm like, I've been coming here for years, and you know, and but it's public land. Everybody's got that right to go out there. But I think that you're going to see that wane off. Those people, they've tried it, have experienced success or, you know, not success, most likely not success. And they've had a hard time doing it and they don't come back to it. But yeah, I think preparedness, there's a lot of great information out there. Again, just like anything else, just vet where you're getting your information from. Find someone that's doing it that you could, you know, use them as a mentor. Hunters in general share just about everything they are, except maybe their spot, you know, and you know, they'll share everything else with you, how they do it, where to do it, you know, and maybe some other areas. But it's yeah, backpacking has a big equation, or a lot that equates to the backcountry hunting. And you know, now I'm 56. I'm counting my life now by how many falls I can do this. I'm closer to 60 than 50. And I look at my friends that did it and did it well. And, you know, they're 65 and they're fading out. And so I'm changing a little bit. Well, for one, I'm trying to draw a sheep or a goat tag or a moose tag in the US because I can't afford to go to Alaska or Canada. So I've got several points. I spend all the money in Colorado every year buying those points. And if I draw one of those tags, that's going to be a real backcountry hunt, you know, and I'm hunting the full season. And going from there. But the other change that I've been making is all the years chasing elk. I love mule deer. Love everything about mule deer.
Do you?
Yeah, and mule deer are a lot easier to pack out. And so I'm pursuing a lot of high-end mule deer tags. And you know, when you're talking about wilderness hunting and kind of some tragedies that happen in the wilderness, it happens to experienced people.
It does.
A few years ago, me and some guys that I'm close friends with, we had rented some horses, and we were going into a spot that we know we're 9 miles into a wilderness in Colorado, an unnamed wilderness in Colorado. And these rental horses we had were just crazy. They were just batty. And we're having problems with them getting them in there. Now, I had brought in a weather band radio. We didn't have InReach at the time. InReach is a fantastic tool that I recommend everybody have if they're going to the backcountry now. But I had a weather radio. We were in there. We had some success the first 2 days, and we're meat hunters. We killed two cows opening morning. We've got 2 open tags yet, but we got some bad weather rolling in, and we're 9 miles from the nearest road with these crazy horses. And we had packed in a full white wall tent because it was, in October in Colorado, you get a lot of snow. And so now we got to pack this thing out. And the pack out went all kinds of wrong. We're 150 miles from camp, or 150 yards from camp. We had loaded these horses up. We're just walking, leading the horses. We're not riding them. We've got panniers on them. We thought we had them, the one load with the tent and the wood stove balanced. Well, we get on a steep, switchback trail coming out of our campsite, and these horses would, they would go, there would be a rodeo at a drop of a hat anyhow. And all of a sudden, the one load, we didn't tighten it up well enough, and that whole pannier just shifts and is now sideways on the horse. And the horse stood stock still, and now we've got to quick tie off and get that load straightened out. Had to unload that horse completely on the side of the now on a steep hill. Anyhow, my point is, we got out late. We got socked in by this freezing wet rain that's testing the quality of our clothing that we're wearing. My headlamp is dying. Batteries are buried somewhere in a pack on a horse that I can't even think about finding. And we're still 4 or 5 miles from camp. And it was outright one of the toughest things we've ever had to come out of. We end up back at the trailhead at the truck at like 10:30, which is late, soaking wet, horses that need to be fed, and horses that didn't want. I kept telling the guys, I think the horse that I was leading, his name was Gray. I think his whole goal was to run me over, kill me, so he could just run back to the trailer to have some grain. And we got real fortunate when we got to the truck. Of course, then we go to hook up the horse trailer, and the horse trailer got dropped off by the rancher, and I'm trying to hook it up to my truck. And the way he parked it, we couldn't get my truck aligned to get the thing down on. So now so we run down. One of the guys runs down to his ranch, manages to catch him. He comes up and sees the sorry state that we're in, and he says, "You boys go down to my ranch, go into the cabin, get warm, start a fire, get warm. I'll take care of the horses in the trailer." He could see how desperate we were, and that really, really paid off. But I mean, and I've been doing this stuff for years, and so is the guys I was with. So experienced pros can get, or I shouldn't say pros, experienced hunters can get in those situations. Be careful if you go to do it on your own. Have some experienced people around you, or shade, or go into the shallow end of the pool to start with.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm becoming a big proponent of backcountry turkey hunting. There's some folks out there that it really grinds their gears when people compare spring turkey. Let me retract that. When they compare backcountry spring turkey to September archery elk. Mm-hmm. And I empathize with where they're coming from, because elk hunting is an experience in and of itself. But when you take September archery elk in a backcountry setting and you compare April or May springtime backcountry turkey hunting, you're doing everything the same. The only thing you're not doing is, for a turkey hunter, you're not pursuing an animal that's going to require you to pack out 350 to 400 pounds of meat, head and hide, right? You're packing out a 18 to 22, 23 pound bird on the average. From the turkey hunting side, I can hunt in any state I want to, for the most part. Most states I can carry 2 to 3 tags. My success is a whole lot greater. But outside of those two differences, time spent, money spent, and pounds packing out, if you're successful, everything else is the same. And I'm trying to encourage people, especially new time or hunters that are going to be brand new to the backcountry experience. I strongly encourage them to consider either a backcountry turkey hunt or a backcountry deer hunt, because you're doing a lot of things the same. You have a
Mm-hmm.
higher or a greater level of success, and you're not investing so much time and money into something that if it's an absolute fail for you and you find that you absolutely do not like it, you haven't spent several years trying to obtain a tag. You're not spending thousands of dollars
Mm-hmm.
on an elk hunt to either find out you don't like it or to be more often than not unsuccessful. The backcountry turkey hunt is the perfect proving ground for a new backcountry hunter, because I mean it's a great time of year. The turkeys are very audible, like elk are. You're calling them, you're connecting with them audibly. You're using the terrain to set up on them. Yeah, you don't have to worry about wind, but the ear, the hearing and the visual capability of a turkey far exceeds that of an elk. And you can't see turkeys coming in. If you're in open timber, you can. But
Mm-hmm.
again, that presents the problem of they can see that calling point from 300 yards away through open timber. They don't come in. They just hang up and go the other way because it's not natural. There's just so many similarities there that I really do. I encourage people. I'm like, hey, if you really think that you want to go on a backcountry elk hunt, please get your gear, go on a backpacking trip, um, and then, or if you can't get up into the wilderness because of where you're at or what's going on in your life, then again, go hike some miles in your neighborhood and then pitch your shelter in the backyard and stay overnight. But try to go do a turkey hunt or a deer hunt. Get your feet wet. See how it goes. See how you like it. You can train physically in your shop or your local gym all you want. Come home, ice bath, stretch, get massages, sleep in your bed, get comfy. When you go do it in the wilderness, there is no recovery, Bob. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're pushing your body all day long and then you're sleeping on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're doing it wet, right? And you're
Yeah.
you're drying your stuff out in your bag overnight so that you can wake up dry, hopefully, and then go
Mm-hmm.
do it again. There is no recovery. You're just chiseling away at your body and your mind every single day. And if you don't know what that's like, um, I strongly suggest that you try out a backcountry turkey hunt. It is an absolute gas. I'm so it's turkey season where I mean we're running right into it, and I'm so
Yeah.
excited about it.
And it's the same mountains. For me, a lot of it is the escape to the mountains. I've never thought of
Yes.
that analogy, Aaron. And actually, I've been planning and hoping if I can get things squared away here, I can run out to Montana and go to my little spot where I love out there so much and buy an over-the-counter turkey tag. And so that could be one. Hey, all right, it didn't line up where I couldn't go this week. I'm not out $1,000 for the elk hunt, and so
Yeah.
I'm considering that. But I'd never thought about giving that as advice. Other advice that I always give to new people is you don't have to have the biggest and best of equipment right off the bat. You don't
No.
need to buy a $1,200 ultralight tent with the ultralight wood stove or any of that. Start with used gear, borrowed gear. I've
Mhm.
got, I would happily have a friend of mine, wants to go backpacking, come on over. I've got like 2 or 3 2-man ultralight tents. I've got all this gear, backpack. I'll loan it to you all because you're not going to wear it out, and just start with that. And kind of get the taste of it, whether you like it or not, too. But I really like that analogy of the backcountry turkey hunt because I was kind of like wanting to combine it also with some shed hunting. You
There you
know,
go.
uh, you could bring back some antlers from a turkey hunt. It's like maybe I'll go shed hunting and turkey hunting, and maybe grab one of my hunting buddies. But if they're not available, I'll go by myself. And figure it all out, and
Bob, I
sleep in
will
your truck.
I will go I will go backcountry turkey hunting with you, Bob.
I'd love that. I would
Yeah.
love that. I'd love that. Yeah. Let me know. But, I think that I still, at the end of the day, even though it seems that so many of these states, and Montana is the example I keep talking about, they've only give 17,000 non-resident tags a year. Now it seems like there's a lot more people that are doing it. Well, I think they're exercising their right to bull hunt and rifle hunt
Yeah.
on that tag. It's a really good tag that way. But what I still encourage people to look at it, because I think as hunters, when we discourage other people, we're also putting our sport at risk for, some of the political actions that are going on around the country and other things like that. We've got to continue to fan the flames and try to bring people into the sport. Here in Wisconsin, opening weekend of rifle season, 500,000 people hit the woods here in Wisconsin. 500,000. At the time, there's all these stats. It's like the third largest army in the world when Wisconsin hits the deer woods. But yet it's declining. It's declining every year. They're noting a decline in hunters, and I think that that's because a lot of it now has turned away from groups to the small private parties with the private land. They don't let anybody else hunt it. They sit and you drive the Wisconsin landscape now. It's changed. All you're seeing is these penthouse blinds everywhere that people are sitting in, and they're not getting out. They're not hunting. I'm real fortunate. I hunt with a huge crew. Rifle season, we sit opening morning till about 9, and then we do some big mass, very safely run gang deer drives as families. This last year we had 26 people on opening day, and a pile of them were kids and a lot of young girls.
Oh, that's
And
great.
it's fantastic. And then by the end of the day on Sunday, no, midday on Sunday, we had 20 deer between the 26 hunters. And we hang them all on one big pole in my buddy's farm. And people drive by and they're like, "You're decimating the deer herd." Well, we keep our own records. We've been doing this for 30 years. It's just that we have a lot of hunters and we really enjoy it. But we're also a meat hunting crew. We got guys that show up with a list. For my family, I need 5 deer this year. Their primary protein in that family is venison. And all right, we're going to get you 5 deer. And maybe that's me shooting a couple of does and putting my tags on it, and here you go, Ben. I got a couple extra deer for you, and we share that resource that way. And so, I still want to encourage people, take up the sport. If you introduce people, I love introducing people to the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an avid hunter and fisherman, take somebody out with you. That's the only way we're going to keep our sports alive in the long run.
And I'm we'll start wrapping this up, Bob, because we both have to get back to other responsibilities, because
Yeah,
we'd probably sit here and talk for another hour.
absolutely.
We've talked about doing hard things, and we've talked about getting out in the wilderness and doing hard things. From a biblical standpoint, from being men of faith, the Bible, contrary to current beliefs of society, right? Current,
Mhm.
I fell prey to this, stumbling over my own stone of, as an prior atheist, looking at Christians as being weak, building full of women and weak men, right? The Bible does not preach to be weak. It does say the meek will inherit the earth, but the Bible does not preach, it does not tell men to be weak. The Bible, contrarily, is that a word?
It is.
Tells men to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
We are supposed to be strong, and we are
Spiritually.
spiritually, mentally, physically, we are supposed to stand strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13 tells you to stand strong, to be men. It says some other things. It's one of my favorite verses, but to paraphrase it tells you to stand strong and to be men. Also, this is one of my favorite things that I've discovered. The Bible, God is big on the wilderness. He wants us to be in the wilderness. We are supposed to be in the wilderness. It's experiencing good and bad things. It makes us better humans. The term wilderness is mentioned 300 times in the Bible. Now do the math on that, compared the amount of times it's mentioned to the number of books in the Bible. That's almost 19 times. Almost 19 times per
Mm-hmm.
book, Bob. God created the wilderness. God created man in the wilderness. God exiled man out of the wilderness. God punished men in the wilderness. God led his chosen people out of slavery through the wilderness. He led his son into the wilderness, and his son was victorious over Satan in the wilderness. Jesus's apostles wandered through the wilderness, going to and from places they were led and called to preach in and save people and bring them to Christianity and the Lord, Bob. We get into Revelations, and Revelations prophesizes horrible things in the wilderness that will end in what?
Well, it's a new life.
A new creation again. We're supposed to be in the wilderness. So go get in the wilderness.
And that's where Jesus retreated. Jesus needed to retreat even. The only perfect human that's ever walked this world, that is where he went to retreat and pray. And I'll tell you, people frequently say, I've never felt closer to God than when I was back there, when I was doing it. And, the wilderness doesn't have to be a federally declared wilderness. It can be a 40-acre plot around the corner from you. It's a quiet retreat. And I think today, more and more, our churches went through a digital detox. We're so stimulated all the time by these digital devices around us. And they're great for a lot of regards. And we're using it in a lot of ways to spread the word of Jesus. But at the same time, we need to retreat from those things, put those things away, and pray sincerely and connect and in an environment where we can listen. You can't listen when you've got whatever, Spotify playing in the background, your email dinging away. You have to retreat. And I love more and more, the older I get, finding places where my cell phone says no service. All right, found a little retreat here. And it's almost because I needed it. And I hate to say this, but it's almost like I needed that excuse. Well, I'm sorry I couldn't answer your call or your text because I was out of service. I love those places, and I seek them out on more and more basis. Father's Day weekend, well, that whole week, my wife and I are going up camping to a really one of our whole family's favorite campground, and there's barely a bar of service up there if you can find it. And the cell phone goes away. You just take it in. Your pace of living changes because it's more about response to the environment around you. All right, it's daylight. It's time to get up. I didn't need an alarm clock. It's time to get up. I'm going to make a little breakfast. I'm going to take off on fishing or whatever I'm doing, the game I'm chasing. But I appreciate you bringing that up, the wilderness. And I'm reading the Bible. Chris Ham and I last year read the Bible all the way through using Terry Lee Cobble's The Bible Recap. And we started again. And Moses has just about the Israelites, as in our reading plan, they're almost out of the wilderness here. And so God provided for the Israelites in the wilderness. He'll provide for you too. He'll make sure that you get it out safe. Be faithful, pray and ask for his guidance through those. And that's always when I get out quiet and alone, that's the thing I'm praying for. Just Lord, speak to me. I have trouble distinguishing the small signs. Please give me billboards and bullhorns. That's how you need to connect with me sometimes. And I can't listen to it unless I'm quiet and away sometimes. So yeah, great stuff, Aaron. I've really enjoyed this a lot.
We're Bob, I think we're going to do this again. Certainly I think we need to plan a hunt together in the future.
All right.
And we're going to record from the field. And it's probably going to be a backcountry turkey hunt.
Well, let me give you an invitation. I've got a little piece of property in northern Wisconsin, and if you'd like to come chase some whitetails in Wisconsin, I'd love to have you. Or turkeys if you want to come up, and we'll go up and we'll chase some of the local flora and fauna. It's probably not that long. I think when I was going to the fire academy, Emmitsburg, Maryland's like 16 hours, so you could make it in a day. You get a tour HHA and whatnot.
I've made that drive a couple of times.
Oh yeah, you've been at the Vortex event and other stuff. Yeah, that's right.
And I'll be doing it again. I'll be up there in July for the HHA event.
Yeah. Well, I know this is one thing I wanted to say because you're not very good at tooting your own horn. Your book is great. Your book is great.
Thank you.
I love stories, and that's nothing but a book of just stories of a real. It was easy for me to connect to you because a lot of this I could see a lot of myself in, and I've been kicking around writing a book, and I don't know. The more and more I read these people that I know writing books, the more I get motivated. So maybe that'll be the next thing for me. Who knows?
I love it. Well, the hardest part is just starting to put words on paper. And again, it's God's timing, right? I look back And sometimes I think, why didn't I do this sooner? Well, because I didn't have the content in my head. I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to write about. I did not know exactly what direction it was going to go or what message I was going to try to give. Right. God knew, I did not. I'm encouraging you not to wait, but when the time's right, if it's in the plan for you, he's going to place it on your heart and you're going to do it. And I will tell you this, if you're called to do it, Bob, it is an incredible experience. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done. And if that point comes, I'm happy to sit down with you and share some lessons learned. And if you want to do it self-published, which I strongly recommend, I can provide you with some ins and outs on that as well.
Well, I'll hit you up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that offer. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, we didn't touch near the stuff that we thought we would. Happens that way, and we've been at it for pretty much 90 minutes now. This has been just an absolute good time, and this has been a very different episode than I've ever recorded. Just because the first half of it we spent talking about serving our communities and our nations through service to our fellow man in the fire service in the military. And what a great conversation. I'm hoping that the listeners, even though they're typically tuning into the Limitless podcast, to get a mouthful of outdoor conversation, right? I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think I might have to start branching out and doing a little bit more of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. It was my pleasure. And I'm a big fan, a listener of the podcast, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Bob, thank you very much. Be limitless.